read this morning in the Megillah, in Eicha, the description of the state of mourning, the suffering, the loss. It seems to be saturated with pessimism up till a certain point. And then the posuk right after, he says, the Novi Yirmiyahu v'Omer Ovad Nitzchi v'Sochalti me Hashem, my eternity, my future, it's lost. He's remembering his state of dejection, of loss, of failure. And then there's a posuk, Zocho Tisko v'Soshoach Olai Nafshi. Something happened, something changed. Zois Oshiv El Libi Al Kain Ochil. I will return this, internalize this into my heart, and therefore I will be hopeful. Chasdei Hashem ki lo yisomnu. The chasodim of the Rebbeinu Shalom have not ceased. Ki lo ycholu rachamov. His mercy on Klal Yisrael hasn't ended. Chadoshim lapkom rabo munasecho. There are intervals between the suffering, between the cataclysms, the crises in Klal Yisrael, and because there are intervals that gives a respite and it gives a certain opportunity to recoup strength. But is that enough to be optimistic? Chelki Hashem Omo nafshi al kain ochel nafshi. My portion is with the Rebbeinu Shalom. My soul said, Ki ochel lo. I will be hopeful to him. Hard to understand what brought about this transition. What changed? The summation afterwards is again one of going back to summarizing the pain. But now it's modified because it's been interspersed with a hopefulness. But what brought about that hopefulness? Posuk that we read in Dvorim, Hoyel Hashem, Hoyel Moshe Be'ez HaTorah Zos. The Balaturim correlates with 3 times that the term Hoyel is used. Hoyel is used here, in this context, that with our Kriya, on Shabbos, that Moshe Rabbeinu began explaining the Torah, teaching the Torah, Be'er, to clarify. Second time, says the Meseres, brought by the Balaturim, is Hoyel v'holchu achay hatzav. They went after the tzav. They went after the Avodah Zarah. In a sense, the opposite. The diametric opposite, 2 ends of the continuum. But then there's another hoil that the Rebbeinu Shalom, hoil lasos, the Rebbeinu Shalom continues to choose us as his people. We're his bonim. So says the Balaturim that there is a there's a haftocha here that ideally, when we're learning the Torah's Moshe, but even in the moments of total failure spiritually, there's a remnant, something residual in the Jew that the Rebbeinu Shalom continues to relate to Kavayachol, and that is cause for optimism. Chazal teach that there are letters that for the sake of interpretation, that those letters are interchangeable, the ches and the hey. Alkein ochil can be read hoil. That it's relating back to that Maseres. That even in the worst situations, Zos Oshiv Elibi Alkein Ochil, I will be optimistic. Why? Because Hoil that the Rebbeinu Shalom is Ochil Hoil, continues to re-choose us as his Am throughout history. Where do I see indications of that? How do I get a grip on that kind of in the midst of the melancholy, the sadness, the mourning? Chadoshim Labkolim, the fact that there are these intervals that give us a certain sense of an opportunity to recoup, and to recoup really means to do tshuva. Tshuva can be any time, all the time, but it's perhaps when we have a breather between megatzaras, then that in itself is a kind of message and an invitation. The Rebbeinu Shalom stretching out as it were, Kaviyachol, an arm to us, a hand to us. There's a medrash. Medrash says that the king made a decree that a massive boulder would be dropped on anyone who defied his orders, his laws. Lo and behold, his son is a avrayan, a transgressor, is a culprit. What does he do? His yortzim, his counselors, his chachomim, his sages, tell him, what you do is you grind down the stone into gravel. And then you can sprinkle the gravel in bits and pieces over a period of time, an extended period of time, on your son. So you're fulfilling your decree, but you're accommodating the urgency to relate to him as son. Similarly, HaKadosh Baruch Hu has spread the tzoros that should have been in one shot, overwhelming, totally annihilating. Instead, it spread. Perhaps there's an allusion to that medrash in the posuk that precedes, just a few psukim before the ochil, hoil, ochil, the optimism suddenly breaks out. There's a posik, Vayagreis b'chatzotz shinei hichbishani ba'efa. I am chewing on the gravel. Yes, that gravel, the spreading it out, and chadoshim lapkorim. It's been spread out over an extended period of time. And therefore, there is cause, there's reason, there's an opportunity for justifying, for relating to this surge of optimism. We read in the Parsha today that Klal Yisrael serves Avodah Zarah, Nota Yisrael. They're sent out to Golus, and Ubikashtem Mishom, and you're going to, from there, from that situation, Mishom, as Hashem Elokecha, Umotzrosa, Ki Sidoshenu Bechol Uvovecho. Again, it doesn't describe what changed. They were serving Avodah Zarah in Eretz Yisrael, and therefore it required the cleansing of Golus, the Onish, the Kapor, the atonement. And now in Chutz La'aretz, they're continuing to serve Avodah Zarah. So what changed? Question number one. Meforshim HaMedayek, that the Umotzosa is Loshen Yochid, it's singular, and Ubikashtem is Rabim. Why the change? So it's interesting. Some of the Meforshim, in fact, indicate that many will search, but only Yechidim will find. I believe the Nachlash Yaakov says that. There's another question that we might ask, that Ponevezh Yerov once asked on the Asora Ravonim, there were 10 main famines that the Medrash lists in a few places, that the B'zeh Sapecha Toich HaLechem is reckoned as a famine by the retribution, the punishment to Adam and Chava, and going on through different periods in history, including Rus, earlier by Avram, by Yitzchak. There are famines. But one famine that's listed there is the famine that the Novi says that the day will come when you're going to be hungry not for lechem, not for bread, thirsty not for water, but for the Dvar Hashem. So that day is going to come. Somewhere on the horizon. It's out there. Ask the Ponevezh Yerov, why should that be listed with the other famines that are purely negative? That's a positive thing. The hunger for ruchnius, for spirituality. Now it does say afterwards, it does say, the Navi says, Yeshotu ba'oretz v'lo yimtzu. They're going to drift in the land and not find. So that's another question we have to try and understand. Why over there won't they find, and over here will they find the posuk we read today? But I imagine the Ponevezh Yerov understood and related to that just that the etzem thirst and hunger for spirituality is a positive thing, even if they won't find. Our question is, why won't they find there and why did they find here? The word Vayishotu we find by the Mon. Rashi says, when they went out to collect the Mon, Vayishotu, Bamidbar, Lelo Omo, without any effort. No strain. It was right there. It got delivered on the spot. You didn't even have to go online to order it. It was there. So what is Vayishotu? Without an effort. Without an investment of my heart and mind. So there's a Tanai that we read in the Kriya. It says, "Ubikashta mishomes Hashem Elokecha b'chol levovecha u'matzosa ki k'zivishena b'chol levovecha." With your entire self, not just in a casual, cavalier fashion, drifting, dilettantish, not window shopping for ideas, not surfing on the web. You're looking at the idea, relating to the idea, and willing to go with it where it will take me, because it's emes. So one of the Forshim says on the Posuk, so Guru Mipnei Ish, the judge, the Shofet, is cautioned not to be intimidated. But so Guru Mipnei Ish is Rosh Tevis Emes. Lo Saguru Mipnei Ish. Saguru Mipnei Ish is Emes. But that means me in my relation to my judging, and every time I have to be machriya when I'm being mitdayen, weighing the alternatives of how, where, and what I should do. But perhaps we have noted in the past that Mishon in Gematria is Mitzrayim. What was the state of affairs in Mitzrayim? Mitzrayim, the state of affairs, was Isarusa de Le'ila, the Rebbe Shalom reached to us. The Rebbe Shalom continues, Lasois Le'ilom, we are his people. Adrabah, the very frequency of the Puranius is the father disciplining his son. And the Shlomo Melech teaches the lack of that discipline is a failure of chinuch and is a disservice, is not being loyal to your son. So I look around and I see Chadoshim Labkon. There are intervals. I see Jews sitting on the floor and saying kinnis. Whether it is apocryphal or isn't apocryphal, but the story is told of the famous story of Napoleon seeing the Jews in Paris continuing to mourn on Tisha B'Av and inquiring and being informed, and he says they'll make it back. Of course, that same Napoleon tried to organize a Sanhedrin to be subordinate to his to his empire and its requirements and its political urgencies to bring the Jews into the fold of being like everybody else so that they could innovate. But he was clever enough to try and do it from within rather than impose it from without. But the Simonim, are we back in Eretz Yisrael? How can we deny that after millennia of not being here, the Rebbeinu Shalom has granted us a chesed? And how can we deny that we owe the establishment that has done so many good things, and I can't ignore those good things. On the other hand, I think of Reb Chatzkel Levenstein, Zatzal, the Mashgiach and Ponovich. The story I'm telling you now, I heard from my Chavrusa, Reb Yosel Tzendret, one of the Akira Yerushalayim, Zatzal, that told me he heard it from the Bocha. He heard this story from the Bocha. This Bocha was a brilliant Bocha in learning in Ponovich, but he was in the habit of demonstrating, projecting, and parading his excellence. Reb Chatzkel never said anything to him. One day Reb Chatzkel was down on the Chovre Beit Kiva in a blisteringly humid day, maybe that's a redundancy, in Bnei Brak, and Reb Chatzkel was going into the post office to carry some small amount. And this Bocha happened by. He said, Reb Chatzkel is an old, frail man, terribly hot, terribly humid. He'll take it. No, yes. Finally, Reb Chatzkel relented, and he carried it up the hill to Ponovich for Reb Chatzkel. The next day, Reb Chatzkel called him over and said, listen, till now I didn't have any hakos hatoiv to you. I didn't owe you anything. I didn't owe you any gratitude. Now I do. So I have to tell you, you're a mushches in Midas. If you don't change, you're parading, you're wearing it on your cuff, your excellence, nothing will come of you. This Bocha told the story to my Chavrusa that Reb Chatzkel saved his life. And so I want to save the lives of the Zionist establishment that I owe so much. They have it all wrong. This is not a country like other countries. It isn't a country that should be reeking with manipulation, dishonesty, corruption, disappearing witnesses, lying as part of the norm. Am Yisrael, to be Am Yisrael, needs this land ultimately, essentially. And only we can make this land work. That's why we read in the Teichacha, Vashimosi Aniyas Ha'otz, Lefnei Avechem, Hayoshim Bo. Those of us who were here right after the 6-day war, it was so evident, so clear what had been in Jewish hands and what had not been in Jewish hands. What had been not in Jewish hands was completely desolate, untended. The greenery was where the Jews were. Not every cheshbon is right. When they drained the swamps in Chulon, they were getting rid of malaria. But it created an ecological disaster. There are still remnants of the disruption to the environment. We say in Shemona Esrei, the Rebbeinu Shalom is Gomel Chasadim Tovim. Zoche Chasdei Yovo is Gomel Chasadim Tovim, and he's the Kaina HaKol. So only his Chasodim can be Chasodim Tovim. If it's Chesed, it's good already, Shen good. Why Chasodim Tovim? Because when a human being does Chesed, there are side effects. He can't anticipate all of the ramifications of what are going to be the extensions of this event. Partially, but not completely. Only the Rebbeinu Shalom can Gomer Chasadim Tovim. Why? Because he's Kaina HaKol. It's all his. The past, the present, the future, everything that is, all of the resources. So he can calculate and prioritize accordingly. We read in the Haftarah that that if your chatoim will be like shoni, like that dye on the silk, externally created that dye and applied from without, then kasheleg, it can be like snow, white with the brilliance of snow. The tshuva, the corrective, because the averas were on the outside. But when in chataichem, if your sins will be like the tola, like that worm, where the dye is created from within, when the averas are internal, they're averas of feeling, of attitude, of idea, in your relationships, then it'll only be kitsema. It'll only be like wool, which is an off-white. It isn't white, like Schiller. And we asked the Rebbeinu Shalom, says the Bnei Yisoscha, that Uvechein, give us the opportunity to do tshuva, so we can be mitdayen fairly, because if we come in, Bayis Rishon was more like was in fact, says the Meshech Chochmah and others, like the die from without. And that's why it was only 70 years between Bayis Rishon and Bayis Sheni. Had to be the corrective of the Shemitas, and even though it's staggering, the Averas were the cardinal sins, but it was external, brought about from the culture, the environment, with all kinds of stiras. Achot, murderer, the most Machiavellian of kings, and yet he had a preciousness, an appreciation of the preciousness of the Torah, and that he wouldn't give away the Sefer Torah. Contradictory, but it's the case in point that we always must carry with us, like the Rambam says, a man is a gregarious creature, he's Ish Medina, he's influenced and impacted by his environment, and therefore his prior responsibility is to set up the odds in his favor. Situate yourself where there's a greater likelihood that you'll succeed in your ruchnius. By Sheni was sinas chinam. That was internal, like that worm that creates its dye from within, internally, and only like Schiller. But Rameir Simcha continues, he says there are two kinds of terchocha. There's a terchocha that's given from a darshan, a rav, a rebbe. His ideas can be heard, but not necessarily translated to action. Because the listener says, he's not in my situation. He doesn't understand my nisyanis. And then there's peer group. That's why I have the response. Peer group will have the effect. Shelo hochichu zeh es zeh. Simcha's medayik, it doesn't say zeh li zeh, lo zeh. It says zeh es zeh on the peer level. That's what might bring it to bring the idea to action. Yeah, he's my age. He knows what it is to be in this situation. He's Ben Gili, he has similar kinds of experiences, challenges. But the ideas of the Darshan, in a door where they're not mechabed those ideas, in the door when they're mezalzel and Talmidei Chachomim, Chazal say, that makes the churban imminent, because it begins the churban, a lack of relating to the essence of Torah. In Shabbos we read in the Haftarah, Tzion b'mishpat tipodeh v'shoveho b'tzedakah. Rabbi Yosef Chaim Sonnenfeld Zatzal, 100 years ago, without a calculator or a computer, made the gematria. Tzion b'mishpat tipodeh is Talmud Yerushalmi in gematria. V'shoveho b'tzedakah is Talmud Babli in gematria. The author of Badei Shulchan, the Bible Kohen, Shvishlaken gesund. We were in Yeshiva together, Chaim Berlin. He told me that Chazal say that Adam Rishon was created his mind more from Eretz Yisrael, and the Leiv from Bovel v'Shar HaRotzes. Bovel is Leiv Vov. That's why in Yerushalmi, when somebody holds somebody's position, it says Adaite. And in Babli, it says Alibe. We're not awarding kudos to this Talmud or that Talmud. It's not in our domain. But the Rebbe of Klal Yisrael, b'Machashakim, we just read in Eicha, Hoshivani is Talmud Babli. Through the lack of clarity, the darkness of the pathways, the circumlocutions, the twisting turns of Golus, I needed Talmud Babli and its methodology, which is what? Shakla Vitalia, question and answer. Engagement, the Asik in Torah. Because only when I'm invested, I have skin and heart and mind in the game. When I'm invested, then I have credibility if I'm trying to encourage another investor. Who's the other investor? First me. Me is another. Then my son and all of Klal Yisrael. B'Machashakim Hoshivani, the Asik in Torah. It comes from that, the enterprise of Amelus. Odom, the Mishnah says, Odom la'omol yulad. La'omol has been noted, I think the Mashal brings it, Almanas lumod, Almanas lelamed, Almanas lasois. If you're not taking the idea to internalize it, integrate it into your person, then it's not going to bring about a different you. It's not going to connect you with that transcendence beyond the limitations of the moment. You have to get beyond being circumscribed with the boundaries of what seem to be the limitations. Practical applications of this thesis. We are all affected by the environment in which we find ourselves. The place, the time, the people, the state of mind. There's an avirah, there's an atmosphere which seeps in. The world has changed, the world is changing, but as one guy once said, the more things change, the more they remain the same. It's changing, but we've been there before, historically, and we developed our immunity, Meishom, in Mitzrayim, because we know that it's Hoyle, that the Rebbeinu Shalom is continuing to reconnect to us as His Am, as His Bonim. It's Chadoshim Labkorim, Rabba Amun Asecha. And we turn to the Rebbeinu Shalom and say, 49 years of Ohr Somayach. one last word to Yedidim of Ohr Somayach out there. A little over 30 years ago, I believe, Ohr Somayach had a dinner, and the guest of honor, as is the custom in these things, you get a prestigious guest of honor. It's part of the culture of America, business world, that his business associates and friends will participate in him being honored financially. We used to call it a Rolodex when you had all the names on the spin. So we had one of the most prestigious lawyers in the United States, Wachtel, Lipton, Rosen, and Katz. Leonard Rosen learned with us. Forbes lists them as one of the 5 top law firms in the United States. Leonard Rosen was an elegant gentleman, really an elegant gentleman. He was learning with us. At his dinner, the room was packed with lawyers. I told him I couldn't resist sharing with them some idea in halachic jurisprudence. Poor man and a rich man come to be middayen. They come for a judgment. So there could be a bias either way, either being excessively the bleeding heart liberal syndrome of being to those seda, don't beautify the poor man just because he's poor. If he's a murderer and a thief, you have to reckon with that, you have to deal with that, don't ignore that. The other maybe is more obvious frequently, is that the rich man, there's a deference. Lo seguru mipnei ish. Room full of lawyers, most were Jewish. I told them, you gentlemen are every day adjudicating between Western culture, its norms, and classical, traditional Judaism. We differ on many things. Certain things we agree, but we differ on many things. As long as you continue to dress the yeshivas in poverty and the universities in the pomp and splendor of royalty, you can't make a fair judgment. Start relating to the yeshivas in that manner and dressing them, supporting them accordingly. The world has changed. Is it the same? Yes, but it's changed. And therefore, there's a new Beis Medrash that for today's Dor, whose concentration span has been greatly, greatly reduced, who are so affected by the external. But they're bonim l'Hashem. The Am that Rebbe Shem continues to choose, Lases Leilam. Are they immersed in Avodah Zarah? As the Rav said so poignantly, elegantly before, anything that I take as a life's passion to displace and replace Torah is a kind of Avodah Zarah. And so, Yaakov Kaplan is sitting here. When his grandfather, Zechron Levracha, and I first began the discussion about starting Ohr Somayach a little over 50 years ago, he listened. And then I said the magic term. I said, everybody says it cannot be done. You cannot make a yeshiva for people who have no background. So they say it cannot be done? Let's do it. The rest is the last 49 years of history, experimentation, and continuing experimentation. The bittersweet sense of Kol Alai Moyed, it's a yontif, no tachnun. Kishem shememayitim besimcha in Ov, Yomar b'im simcha in order. What's the kishem? What's the connection between the two? Two phenomena, separate, discrete, independent. But in order, as long as the Beis Mikdash isn't built, there has to be a corner of your heart and mind reserved for the Avelis. Simcha, Malbim b'simcha. Yeah, what's dominant? The dominant theme is simcha, but there has to be a corner of Avelis. Conversely, in a mirror image, on Tisha B'Av, Memaitim b'simcha. Memaitim means that there has to be a corner, a little piece of simcha that we have seen, are seeing, in the midst of a sense that the Rebbeinu Shalom is reaching to us, is speaking to us, the shevet and the mishenet, the crutch and the cane to discipline simultaneously, the crutch to lean on. Shem Yitain, that we should see Bias HaGoel B'Mheira B'Yameinu.